All right. Well, welcome to our Bible study today. And we are going to be in Psalm 44 today. And I have titled this particular chapter, The Bleating of God's Sheep. Now, do you ever watch a herd of sheep, or a flock? I guess sheep are called flocks. And you listen to the sounds that they make. It's called bleating. And they just do that, all the time. And I wonder sometimes, what are they saying? Are they trying to communicate to the shepherd? What are they trying to say? I don't know. But God compares his people to sheep as well. This is his flock. We are part of his flock of sheep. And we too pray to the Father, and I have called this the bleating of God's sheep. What is it that God's people are saying as we go through life and we make our little sounds that we do? What is being lifted up to the Lord? So we're going to look at that. First of all, we want to see that the sheep offer up praises and thanksgiving for past deliverances. Look what he says in Psalm 44, verse 1. "O God, we have heard with our ears, and our fathers have told us the work that you did in their days, in the days of old. You, with your own hand, drove out the nations, and then you planted them. You afflicted the peoples, and then you spread them abroad. And for by their own sword they did not possess the land, and their own arm did not save them. But you, your right hand and your right arm, and the light of your presence, for you favored them." So what he's saying here is, he said, we've heard from old how you delivered our fathers from slavery in Egypt. And we've also heard how you gave victory to our ancestors over the promised land. You defeated the giants and the Canaanites and the Hittites and the pagans that were there. And it says, he says right there, it wasn't by their own sword or by their own valor or courage, but it was your right hand and your right arm and the light of your presence, because you favored them. And so they're acknowledging what God has done in the past for their people, for his people. And so then he says, the psalmist just says, Lord, you did that for them, and I know you will do it for us. And so here, the next few verses, he talks about future deliveries. I know if you did it for them, you will do it for us. Look at verse 4. You are my king, O God. Command victories for Jacob. Through you, we will push back our adversaries. Through your name, we will trample down those who rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, nor will my sword save me. But you have saved us from our adversaries, and you have put to shame those who hate us. And in God we have boasted all day long, and we will give thanks to your name forever. Selah. That word Selah, of course, means pause musically and think about what was just presented. So let's think about that. So what does he say there? Who grants success? God does. God is the one who grants people success in whatever they do. And Psalm 127 verse 1 says, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. And unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. Now, that word Lord is all uppercase, so he's saying unless Yahweh builds the house, unless Yahweh guards the city, then it's those who try to do it are just working in vain. In other words, you can't do this by yourself. God is the one who has to build the nation. God is the one who has to strengthen the church body. God is the one who has to establish your home and grant you success. And we could stay up all night long and watch for the burglars or for marauders to come and steal from us. And it wouldn't do us any good if the Lord himself did not watch over us. We could stand up, we could fight, but without God, we could also lose. But with God, he will grant us success. He will grant us the victory. And so it is God who delivers us. It is God who saves us and grants us success. And that's why we boast in him. We give our thanks to his name forever, because he is the one who takes care of us. In fact, in Isaiah 41, verse 10, God says through that prophet, he says to us, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God." In other words, what he's saying there is, don't look for help all around you. Look to me. I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. And surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So God is the one who helps us. So when times are difficult, and maybe you're starting to feel frightened or uncertain about life, don't look around for help from other people. Look to God. He is the one. Now, he may send other people to help us physically, but spiritually and all around us, he will provide. He's using those other people who come to help us. But nevertheless, whatever is going on in your life, look to God. He will strengthen you, and he will uphold you and help you through whatever you're going through. So now the psalmist here, he has already recognized what God did in the past. He's recognized that God will grant them success in the future, but now he's got some present troubles. He's got things going on in his life right now that he doesn't understand why. Let's look at what he says. He says, "Yet you have rejected us and brought to us to dishonor, and you do not go out with our armies. You cause us to turn back from the adversary, and those who hate us have taken spoil for themselves. You have given us as sheep to be eaten, and have scattered us among the nations. You sell your people cheaply, and have not profited by their sale. You make us a reproach to our neighbors, a scoffing and a derision to those around us. You make us a byword among the nations, a laughingstock among the peoples. And all day long, my dishonor is before me, and my humiliation has overwhelmed me." So what we find here, verse 16, "Because of the voice of him who reproaches and reviles, and because of the presence of the enemy and the avenger." So what he's saying here is life is filled with troubles. And this is a lot of times what the bleating of the sheep is about. It's about their troubles and what they're going through at the moment. Life is full of dishonor and persecution and hate and defeat and derision and ridicule. And the thing about this is that the psalmist even recognized is that God is the one who is doing it. He is the one. And sometimes we don't like to think that God would do something like that to us. But here's what I want you to remember. Remember that absolutely nothing happens to us that God doesn't allow for his purpose. Sometimes he allows us to suffer persecution or derision or defeat. dishonor. Sometimes he does that. He always has a purpose in it. And what I said this past Sunday in our message on justification, and is that one of the things that changes for us when we become Christians is that now, as a Christian in Christ, our sufferings have a purpose. And so when the troubles come into our life, there is a purpose for that trouble. God is allowing that to come upon us, and he may have even sent someone, a spirit of someone, to bring it upon us, because he has a certain purpose he wishes to accomplish within us. He's creating us to be more like him. He's strengthening us, teaching us to trust in him, and building within us the habit of reaching out and coming to him and clinging to him when we need to, when we ought to be doing that. So, yes, life is filled with troubles, and God is the one who does it many times. So, but don't let it get you down, because he's in control and he's trustworthy and he never, ever makes mistakes. And so now the psalmist goes on, he listed out all of his troubles, and then he proclaims his innocence. He says, all of this has come upon us, but Lord, we have not forgotten you. We have not dealt falsely with your covenant, and our heart is not turned back, and our steps have not deviated from your ways. So he's saying here, yes, we have stumbled occasionally. We do stumble, but we don't turn back from away from you. We haven't ever done that. We are still, we still love you and are your people, and we still seek you. And so then he says, yet you have crushed us in a place of jackals and covered us with the shadow of death. He said, I don't understand why this is happening. We are your people. We are faithful. And yet you allow this to come upon us, and we don't know why. And the truth of the matter is, he doesn't even answer this question. But we have to trust that God never makes mistakes, and he knows what he's doing. And he's using this to change us and to make us into his image and to shape us to be the kind of people and tools that he wants as he ministers and interacts with the world at large. Now, I want to take a little side note here. I want to chase this little rabbit. There in verse 19, it says here, you have crushed us in a place of jackals. Well, I went back to the Hebrew, and the original Hebrew text, the word there for jackals actually is dragons. It means dragon or a serpent-like creature. Now, to us, a jackal is more like a wild dog or something, maybe a hyena or something like that. But in the Hebrew language, that word that the psalmist uses there is the word for dragons. Now, why do I bring this out? Why is this significant? Well, first of all, the Bible is filled with imagery of dragons and serpents, because some of the fallen angels are dragon-like creatures, or serpent-like creatures. The seraphim are said to be serpentine in appearance of some form. Satan is called the great red dragon in Revelation, and even in Genesis. And when we come to Adam and Eve there at the tree of life, our Bible says the serpent spoke to Eve. Well, the reality is, in the Hebrew, it doesn't say serpent, it says nakash. And nakash can be a serpent, or it can be a serpentine-like creature. And so we believe that was one of the fallen angels with a serpentine-like creature. So what? And in reality here, Israel proper. If you look on a map where Mount Hermon is where the angels fell from heaven, where they left their abode and they came to earth to establish their own dominion in rebellion against God. And they established it there on Mount Hermon. And so these serpentine creatures, these dragon-like angels, whatever, they owned that land, or they claimed to own it anyway. And that whole area is the area that God chose for Eden. And it's the area that God chose for his nation and for his city. His hill is there. His throne will be there one day, and it will sit right there. And so what the psalmist is saying here is, here in this place, this nation of Israel is a place that is filled with spiritual dragons and the serpentine like angels that are against you. You have crushed us on their own turf. You've used them to crush us. So that was the point of that. And it's a nuance that is in the Hebrew. So why didn't our translators translate that as dragons? Instead, they used jackals. Well, it's because they don't believe it. They just don't think that, they're thinking, well, nobody would believe that these were actually dragons. That's a fantasy world, the translators would think. Most people think that's a fantasy, and so they're not going to promote that. But in the original Hebrew, that is what it says. You have crushed us in a place of dragons and covered us with the shadow of death. All right. That's just a little side note, a little rabbit to chase. It's something to think about. And it's something to, it's some deep study, something to give some thought to. So the unspoken question in all of this, he said, yes, we've stumbled, but we've not turned back to you, and yet you've crushed us in this place. And the unspoken question is why? Why have you done that? And he really never answers the question. He just doesn't, because he doesn't have an answer. He just leaves it hanging out there. And so in the next section, we have this plea for present mercies. This plea for mercy. He says, verse 20, if we had forgotten the name of our God or extended our hands to a strange God, would not God find this out? For he knows the secrets of the heart. But for your sake we are killed all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. This psalm here is really about the suffering of God's people. It really is. This whole psalm here is about the suffering of God's people and whether or not they trust him. They're saying they do. The psalmist here is saying, we trust you, Lord. That's why we don't understand. We stumble, sure, but we haven't forsaken you. So why does it feel like you have forsaken us? And so that's why I have termed this psalm the bleating of God's flock. He says, arouse yourself. Why do you sleep, O Lord? Awake, do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our affliction and our oppression? For our soul has sunk down into the dust. Our body cleaves to the earth. Rise up and be our help. Redeem us for the sake of your loving kindness. So that's the bleating of God's sheep. Lord, we have sunk down. We feel like we are about to die, and our soul is sunk into the dust, and our body rots away into the earth. Rise up, Lord. Be our help. Redeem us for the sake of your loving kindness. And that word loving kindness in Hebrew is translated mercy in the King James. And mercy is a closer meaning, I suppose. I'm not sure why the translators used loving kindness. I guess it was a way of describing mercy, but that's what he means. For the sake of your mercy. Have mercy on us. That's the bleating of God's sheep. Lord, I remember what you've done for us in the past, and we believe that you will do for us again in the future. But today, Lord, today we are suffering and we need you. Rise up, O Lord, and redeem us for the sake of your mercy. And that is Psalm 44, the bleating of God's flock. Isn't that amazing? That's really neat. So, and it's okay to do that, by the way. When you are in trouble, kneel down, pray to God, and tell him about your troubles and plead for his mercy and his rescue out of your troubles. Plead for his deliverance and cling to him, and he will prove himself faithful and trustworthy every single time. And remember, whatever you're going through, God never makes mistakes. There's a purpose in it. You may not see it today. You may not see it for a long time, but there is a purpose in it somewhere. And one day he will show you what that was. So cooperate with him and walk with him because he loves you and he cares for you. And I love you too. And I pray for you. So walk with him. In the meantime, God bless. And I will see you on Sunday morning on Facebook. All right. God bless.